Because the FAT campaign paper allows you to choose a social marketing, health communication, or political communication campaign, the choices are in many ways endless. However, I know that brings with it some anxiety or some ambiguity about the assignment expectations and the ways that you might structure an effective fact-based argument as it relates to the thesis of that paper and the three main points that you build. So I thought I would present you with a few ideas that you could follow for each of those particular types of campaigns you might choose to build your paper into. And so what follows is a slide for each of the following: one on social marketing campaigns, one on health communication campaigns, and one on political communication campaigns. In each, I've sought to identify at least 3 different ways you might focus your paper, and in each of those ways, I've sought to provide you both an idea of the way you might structure that thesis and also some questions you might ask yourself to develop your analysis. Perhaps you're considering doing your paper about a social marketing campaign. Remember, we describe social marketing campaigns principally as those campaigns that sell ideas. And so in this sense, they're not directed at making future changes. Those are likely going to be policy campaigns. Instead, these seek to create influence or change attitudes and behaviors in ways that lead to intended outcomes in the future. So if you choose to analyze a social marketing campaign, you might ask yourself one of the following questions and build a paper around it. Of course, you could certainly choose another as well. The first thing you might think about is how that social marketing campaign borrows from particular marketing strategies and appeals that come from traditional marketing but have otherwise been recrafted or developed in nuanced and unique ways. In this sense, you might ask yourselves in what ways the campaign resembles a traditional marketing campaign and how does it influence audiences' attitudes. If you choose to pursue that question, you might also explain how the campaign uses traditional marketing appeals to influence the audience's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. The second thing you might think about if you choose a social marketing campaign is, of course, how you could connect it to the theory of social identity and stakeholder mobilization that we describe therein. And so in that regard, you might ask yourself, how does the campaign mobilize social identity, and which stakeholders are activated and mobilized, and perhaps why? If you choose that route, you might explain how the campaign enlists its advocates and supporters, and how it identifies key demographics and those individuals that it wants to tailor its message towards. Perhaps towards that end, you could think about sympathetic or supportive, neutral, and hostile audiences. Third, and finally, if you're working within the social marketing campaign realm, you might think about the trichotomy of persuasion, the source, message, and receiver characteristics, and ask yourself how these are distinguished among high and low elaboration audiences. Of course, that would require you to make some pretty sophisticated connections to elaboration likelihood modeling, and would probably be a good sign for a quality paper. If you follow that route, you might explain how the campaign appeals to central and peripheral routes of elaboration with various details and attention to trait and state factors of the audience. However, perhaps you're not interested in social marketing campaigns and you choose to pursue an analysis of a political campaign. If you choose a political campaign, there are perhaps 3 broad strategies you could take, and you might think of your own. The first is to think about the types of messages that are used and the various audience attitudes that respond to those types of messages. You might recall from our most recent lecture on political communication campaigns a discussion about how there are 4 different types of political messages that are used in advertising campaigns. If you chose this route, you might detail how the various messages used by that campaign were strategically tailored to different audience dispositions. The second thing you might think about in the context of political communication campaigns are the campaign's tasks and fundamental goals. Toward this end, you might ask yourself, what channels does the campaign use to accomplish its task, goals, and purpose? Returning to that political communication lecture, you'll find that we identified 4 common channels used in political communication campaigns. If this were the route you should choose to go for this paper, you'd likely find yourself explaining why these channels were chosen and using primary and secondary research to do so. Finally, if you're continuing an analysis of political campaigns, you might think about the political strategy and the effort to reach market media saturation. Toward this end, you'll ask yourself which of the 9 campaign advertising strategies was used, and you'll detail why. Return to that recent voiceover lecture, and you'll find details about each of those 9 strategies coupled with our reading materials. Those should help provide you the fundamental citations you might need to build that argument. However, you should note that doing this is going to require you to find some pretty difficult primary research about how much market advertising the various candidates you're looking into were actually purchasing. And this might mean some pretty specific and in-the-weeds research. However, I'd be happy to help you with that if you choose this topic and you're working with it through GChat. The third and remaining type of campaign that you could choose to write your analysis about is a health communication campaign. If you choose to analyze a health communication campaign, I have 3 broad strategies to outline. The first is to think a little bit about the types of messages used and the audience's attitude and response. And toward that end, you'll be asking yourself, how are different messages used to move the audience along an attitude continuum? Think back to social judgment theory, and you might recall how we talked about anchors and the way that we might move individuals from a latitude of rejection toward a latitude of consideration or a latitude of non-commitment into a latitude of acceptance and hopefully a latitude of action and change. Toward this end, you'll be detailing how messages are tailored to different audience dispositions, those supportive, those neutral, and those hostile audiences strategically. Secondly, you might think a little bit about the campaign tasks and goals, and ask yourself, what channels does the campaign use to accomplish its task, goals, and purpose? And explain why those particular channels were chosen to reach the particular demographics they're tailored toward. Third and finally, you might think a little bit about the strategy that's used by this particular campaign to appeal to various different audiences in regards community dialogue. Our health communication lecture discusses community dialogue as a process that's involving a number of different stakeholders into various different action issues to create community change. The example we use in the voiceover lecture is something like the Flint water crisis. Certainly, as we think about a number of other local environmental issues, they tend to have pretty significant and considerable health effects. Toward that end, those strategies and campaigns aspire to create a community dialogue. You might ask yourself what appeals are used in association with which theories to create the most effective modes of community dialogue sought by that campaign you're analyzing. So those are just a few ideas for the upcoming fact, argument, paper, and outline assignment. However, if you have any other ideas or unique takes you want to make on your own, don't hesitate to do so. I don't present this video to box you in, but rather to start you off with a number of different ideas. Do note we have a number of important upcoming classes, including the fact, argument, paper, and outline, which is due April 16th, Writing Journal number 6 due this week on Tuesday, and also Writing Journal number 7 due prior to that fact, argument, paper on April 14th. However, you're ready to complete that Writing Journal number 7 as soon as you've completed this Thursday's lecture on health communication. Thanks for following along with this longer than usual update video. I wanted to provide you some details about the upcoming assignment and also that opportunity to earn extra credit. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out at any time using the Google Hangouts line or even just sending me an email.